I remember the exact moment my life crumbled beneath me. It wasn't when the first tumor appeared on the MRI, or when the doctor delivered the diagnosis in that sterile examination room with its two bright lights. It wasn't even during those initial brutal rounds of chemotherapy that left me hollow and haunted. No, it was much simpler than that. It was the look on my doctor's face when he asked about my support system. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Do you have family who can help you through this, Thomas? Dr. Brenner asked, his pen hovering above my chart, eyes soft with practiced compassion. He just explained my treatment plan: aggressive chemotherapy followed by radiation, a protocol that would consume the next year of my life. I opened my mouth to give the automatic response, the one I'd been giving for years whenever anyone asked about my family. The practiced lie about a busy son in finance, a daughter teaching abroad, both just a phone call away if I ever needed them. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the gravity of my situation, or simply exhaustion from pretending. Whatever the reason, for the first time in decades, I told the truth. "No," I said, my voice steady and clear in that quiet office. "I have a son who hasn't spoken to me in 15 years, a daughter who sends Christmas cards addressed to occupant, and an ex-wife who found happiness with someone who wasn't married to his career." I took a breath, surprised by my own candor. "So no, doctor, I don't have family support." The silence that followed was profound. Dr. Brenner set down his pen and removed his glasses, a gesture so human it caught me off guard. I expected pity, perhaps awkward reassurance. Instead, I watched as his professional veneer cracked. His eyes reddened and he blinked rapidly, turning away briefly before facing me again. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice rougher than before. "That's—" He stopped, cleared his throat. "I've been doing this job for 28 years, and sometimes patients remind me of things I need to hear." He looked at his watch, a gesture I recognized from my own playbook, checking the time when emotions threatened to override professionalism. "What do you mean?" I asked, genuinely curious why my pitiful admission had affected him so deeply. Dr. Brenner's smile was tinged with sadness. "I haven't spoken to my son in 3 years. Ridiculous argument about his career choices. I don't even remember the details anymore, just that I was right and he was wrong." He laughed, a hollow sound. "At least that's what I've been telling myself." I nodded, understanding completely. How many times had I justified my absence at soccer games, recitals, and family dinners with the righteous belief that providing financially was enough, that my children would someday understand the sacrifices I made for their future. "The thing is," I said, "my kids were right to walk away. I was never there. I thought making partner at my firm was more important than making memories. By the time I realized my mistake, the distance had hardened into something immovable." Dr. Brenner looked at me intently. "And now, facing this diagnosis? Now I wish I had someone who would drive me to chemotherapy or bring me soup when I'm too sick to stand." I smiled ruefully. "But that's not how life works, is it? We make choices, and then we live with them." Outside the window, Seattle rain painted everything in shades of gray, a perfect backdrop to our conversation. Dr. Brenner seemed to be weighing something in his mind, his eyes distant and thoughtful. "Thomas," he finally said, "cancer treatment isn't just medical. It's emotional and practical, too. Patients with strong support systems have better outcomes. That's not just bedside manner talking. It's documented in research." He tapped my file. "We need to figure out who's going to be there when the treatment gets rough." I leaned back in my chair, suddenly exhausted. "I have friends, colleagues. I can hire help." "That's not the same," he said gently. "It's what I have," I replied, more sharply than intended. Dr. Brenner held my gaze for a moment longer than was comfortable, then nodded once. "I'm going to refer you to our patient support services. They can help coordinate practical matters." He hesitated. "And our counseling team." "I don't need therapy," I interrupted. "Everyone needs someone to talk to, Thomas. Especially now." He wrote something on a prescription pad and handed it to me. But instead of medication instructions, it contained a handwritten note. Call my son. I looked up, confused. That's my reminder to myself. Maybe it can be yours, too.
The goal isn't to secure caregivers, she explained. It's to begin healing regardless of the outcome. Your children may or may not respond, but you'll have begun the process of closing the circle. I left her office with a strange mixture of skepticism and hope. That evening, I sat at my desk, overlooking the Seattle skyline, and began what felt like the most difficult brief I'd ever drafted, a letter to my son. "Dear Michael," I wrote, then stopped, overwhelmed by everything unsaid between us. How do you condense 15 years of regret into paragraphs? How do you acknowledge harm without seeming to use illness as leverage? I started again. I was wrong. About many things, but especially about what makes a life valuable. Your choice to teach wasn't a rejection of my values. It was an embrace of your own. I didn't understand then. I'm trying to understand now. The words came slowly at first, then faster. I wrote about my diagnosis without dramatizing it, stated facts without demands. I acknowledged the pattern of my absence throughout his childhood, the milestone moments sacrificed at the altar of career advancement. I didn't ask for forgiveness or reconciliation, only offered my belated recognition of the pain I'd caused. I'm not writing because I expect anything from you, I concluded. I'm writing because I should have said these things long ago, regardless of my health. You deserved a father who saw you for who you are, not who I wanted you to be. I'm sorry I wasn't that father. I'm proud of the man you've become without me. I sealed the letter before I could reconsider, then began another to Emma. Her estrangement had been quieter, a gradual drifting rather than explosive confrontation. She'd maintained minimal contact, holiday cards, occasional group texts, but the emotional distance was just as vast. The next morning, I mailed both letters, feeling strangely lighter despite no expectation of response. My first chemotherapy session was scheduled for the following week. As the date approached, my carefully constructed logistical plan began to show cracks. The transportation service I'd arranged canceled the day before. My backup plan, a colleague from work, fell through when a client emergency arose. By the morning of treatment, I was facing the humiliating prospect of calling a ride service for what everyone warned would leave me debilitated. I was about to make the call when my doorbell rang. Opening it revealed a woman in her 60s with short silver hair and a no-nonsense expression. "Thomas Wheeler?" she asked. "Yes," I replied, cautiously. "I'm Margaret from the Cancer Center's volunteer driver program." She consulted a clipboard. "I'm here to take you to your appointment." I frowned in confusion. "I didn't arrange this." "Dr. Brenner added you to our priority list." She looked at me expectantly. "Are you ready to go?" The drive to the hospital was quiet until Margaret abruptly asked, "First time with chemo?" I nodded. "My husband went through it 3 years ago. Colorectal cancer. He's in remission now." She navigated through traffic with practiced ease. "The first day is mostly about education and understanding the process. The real challenge starts when you get home." "I've made arrangements," I said stiffly. Her glance was skeptical but kind. "Everyone needs help sometimes, Mr. Wheeler, even people who've spent their lives being self-sufficient." At the cancer center, I was escorted to the chemotherapy suite, a large room filled with recliners arranged in a semicircle, some occupied by patients in various states of treatment. The nurse assigned to me, Jason, explained each medication as he prepared the IV. "This is going to take about 4 hours," he said. "Some patients read, some sleep, some watch movies." He gestured to a tablet mounted on an adjustable arm. "Let me know if you need anything for nausea or discomfort." I settled in with my laptop, determined to use the time productively. But concentration proved impossible as the drugs began flowing into my system. Around me, other patients chatted with family members who had accompanied them. Spouses with knitting projects, adult children working remotely from laptops. The quiet hum of companionship during a difficult experience. Midway through my treatment, nausea struck with unexpected force. Jason quickly administered anti-nausea medication, but the episode left me shaken. I closed my laptop, suddenly aware of my vulnerability in a way that spreadsheets couldn't address. Yet beneath the caution, something authentic was emerging. She asked thoughtful questions about my treatment. I inquired about her work in environmental law, listening, truly listening, perhaps for the first time, to her passion for something I'd once dismissed as idealistic. As she prepared to leave, she hesitated at the door. "Your letter," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "It helped to read that you understand why we—" She trailed off. "Needed distance," I supplied. She nodded. "Michael took it harder than I did, you know. The way you dismissed his teaching career. He wanted your approval so badly." "I know that now," I said quietly. "Too late, perhaps, but I do know." Her expression softened slightly. "I don't think it's too late, Dad. But it's not simple either." She adjusted her bag on her shoulder. "I'll be back in Seattle next month. I could check in again." "I'd like that," I said, careful not to press for more than she was offering. After she left, I stood at my window, watching until she appeared on the street below, a small figure moving purposefully through the crowd. My daughter, still partly a stranger to me, yet connected by bonds that even years of neglect hadn't fully severed. That night, I received another text from Michael. "Emma said you seem different. Are you?" I considered my response carefully. "I'm trying to be. Not because of the cancer, but because of what it's shown me about what matters." His reply came hours later. "I'm in Tacoma for a teaching conference, weekend after next. Could possibly detour to Seattle for coffee." My hand shook slightly as I typed, "I would welcome that very much." The following morning, I met with Sophia again to review my care plan. The practical aspects were functioning well enough. The home health aide, the transportation service, the meal deliveries. But something had shifted in my demeanor, and she noticed immediately. "You seem different today," she observed. "My children have reached out," I told her, still amazed by the reality of it. Tentatively, cautiously, but it's something. Her smile was warm. "That's wonderful, Thomas. Remember, though, this is just the beginning of a process. There will be difficult conversations ahead, old wounds reopened before they can truly heal." "I know," I said. "But for the first time, I feel like there's a possibility of connection before—" I didn't finish the sentence. "Before it's too late," she completed gently. "That's what everyone wants, ultimately, to close the circle before the end." "Yes," I agreed, the simple truth of it resonating deeply. "That's exactly what I want." As I left her office, I passed Dr. Brenner in the hallway. Our eyes met in brief understanding. Two men working to rebuild what pride and stubbornness had dismantled, finding in illness an unexpected path toward healing. The day of my coffee meeting with Michael arrived with unexpected significance. This wasn't simply another medical appointment to mark on my calendar. This was my first face-to-face conversation with my son in 15 years. I found myself doing something I hadn't done in decades, standing before my mirror, fussing over my appearance like a nervous teenager. Cancer had already begun its visible work. My face was thinner, clothes hanging loosely where they once fit perfectly. I'd lost most of my hair after the second chemotherapy session, not gradually, as I had expected, but almost overnight. waking to find my pillow covered with silver-gray strands. I shaved the rest, preferring deliberate baldness to the patchy alternative. I chose my outfit carefully, casual but dignified. No suit armor today, just a simple sweater and slacks that wouldn't scream sick man or corporate lawyer. I wanted to meet my son as simply a father, stripped of the professional identity I'd once wielded like a shield. We'd agreed to meet at a small cafe near Pike Place Market, neutral territory with an easy escape route for Michael if things became uncomfortable. I arrived 30 minutes early, securing a quiet corner table with a view of the entrance. The waitress brought me herbal tea with a sympathetic smile. My appearance made my condition obvious to most people now. At precisely 2 p.m., he walked in. My son, 40 now, but in my mind still the frustrated 25-year-old who'd walked away from our final argument. His dark hair was cropped shorter than he'd worn it in his youth, flecked with early gray at the temples. He carried himself with quiet confidence, scanning the cafe until our eyes met. For a moment, we simply looked at each other across the space, a tableau of reunion frozen in time. Then he approached, and I stood, uncertain of the appropriate greeting after so many years. A handshake seemed too formal, a hug too presumptuous. We settled for an awkward nod as he took the seat across from me. "You look," he began, then paused, clearly reassessing his words. "Like I have cancer?" I supplied with a small smile. "It's okay to acknowledge it." He relaxed slightly. "I was going to say different, not just physically." The waitress returned, and Michael ordered black coffee. When she departed, silence descended again, the weight of unspoken history settling between us like a third presence at our table. "Thank you for coming," I said finally. "I know this isn't easy." He studied me, his eyes, so like his mother's, assessing. "Your letter surprised me. It didn't sound like you." "It was me," I said quietly. "Just a part I never showed you." He nodded, accepting this without comment. "Emma said you're doing chemo." "Yes, 3rd session next week. It's—" I hesitated, then decided on honesty. "It's brutal, but necessary." "Prognosis?" he asked, his tone carefully neutral. "Uncertain. Pancreatic cancer, caught relatively early but still aggressive. The treatment is working, but—" I spread my hands in a gesture of acknowledgement. "No guarantees." Michael absorbed this information with the measured consideration of a teacher accustomed to processing difficult material. "Is that why you reached out? Because of the diagnosis?" The question was direct, piercing straight to the heart of the matter. In our family, we'd never excelled at emotional discussions, but Michael had clearly developed skills I lacked. "The diagnosis was a catalyst," I admitted, "but not in the way you might think. It didn't make me suddenly sentimental or afraid. It made me honest, with myself first, then with you and Emma." I met his gaze. "I didn't write because I need caregivers. I wrote because I finally understood how much I'd sacrificed for things that don't matter in the end." His coffee arrived, and he wrapped his hands around the mug without drinking. "You've had that epiphany before, Dad. When Mom left, when you missed my college graduation because of the Westridge case. Each time you promised to change. Then the next big client came along." The assessment stung precisely because it was accurate. "You're right," I acknowledged. Words were always easier than actions for me. But this time, I gestured to my now bald head, this time the lesson comes with consequences I can't negotiate my way out of. He took a sip of coffee, studying me over the rim of his mug. "Do you know what I remember most about childhood? The sound of your car pulling out of the driveway before dawn. Every morning, that was my alarm clock. You leaving. And most nights, I'd be asleep before you returned." I swallowed hard, the simple observation cutting deeper than any accusation. "I thought I was building something for you and Emma. Security, opportunities, a legacy. What we wanted was a father, someone who showed up, not just financially, but physically, present. A memory surfaced. Michael at 12, pitching a no-hitter in his youth league championship game. I'd promised to be there, but got pulled into an emergency client meeting. By the time I arrived, the game was over. The celebrations finished. He'd never mentioned it again, but something changed between us that day. A quiet withdrawal I'd been too busy to properly notice. "I missed so much," I said, the words inadequate but necessary. "Your games, your graduation, the day you decided to become a teacher." He looked surprised that I'd mentioned his career. "You hated that decision." "I didn't understand it," I corrected gently. "I thought success looked like mine. Corner office, name on the letterhead, influence with people in power. I couldn't see that success could also look like shaping young minds, building critical thinkers, creating the kind of impact that ripples through generations." Michael's expression shifted slightly, not quite softening, but something in his posture eased. "I have students who still email me years after graduation, former troublemakers, now in college, telling me my history class was the first time they felt their opinions mattered. That's my version of winning a case." "It's a better victory than any I ever won," I said honestly. "More meaningful, more lasting." He studied me, searching for insincerity. Finding none, he asked, "How did you go from telling me I was throwing away my potential to actually understanding this?" "Partly time, partly watching Dr. Brenner, my oncologist, reconnect with his own estranged son. Mostly facing my mortality without the distractions of depositions and client calls." I smiled ruefully. Nothing clarifies priorities quite like a terminal diagnosis. His head jerked up. "Terminal? I thought you said the treatment was working." I realized my mistake. "It is. I shouldn't have used that word. Serious is more accurate. There's a good chance of remission." Michael set down his mug. "Don't sugarcoat this for me, Dad. I'm not a child anymore." "No, you're not," I agreed, struck by the man he'd become without my guidance, perhaps because of its absence. "The truth is, my type of cancer has a 5-year survival rate of about 30% with aggressive treatment. But I'm otherwise healthy, caught it relatively early, and responding well to the protocol." He nodded, processing this with the same measured consideration he'd shown throughout our conversation. "Are you scared?" The question was so direct, so unlike our family's usual emotional circumnavigation, that it caught me off guard. "Yes," I admitted, the single syllable encompassing more vulnerability than I had allowed myself in decades. Not of death itself exactly, more of leaving nothing meaningful behind. "You've built a successful career," he pointed out, "won important cases. Cases that will be forgotten as soon as the next precedent overturns them. I defended corporations, not principles, made rich clients richer." I shook my head. "That's not legacy. That's just activity." Michael was quiet for a long moment, then asked, "So what would be meaningful to you now?" The question echoed Sophia's from weeks earlier, but coming from my son, it carried different weight. "Reconciliation," I said simply, "not erasing the past, but finding a way forward that honors the truth of it while allowing for possibility." "Possibility," he repeated, testing the word. "That's carefully phrased. I'm not asking to be instantly forgiven or welcomed back as if nothing happened. I'm just asking for the chance to know the man you've become, to listen, to learn." He glanced at his watch, a teacher's habit, I imagined, always aware of time. "I should go soon. I have dinner plans in Tacoma." My heart sank at the brevity of our reunion, though I tried not to show it. "Of course. Thank you for making time." He hesitated, then reached for his phone. "I'd like to know more about your treatment schedule. Maybe I could check in occasionally." The offer, tentative as it was, felt monumental. "I'd like that." We exchanged contact information, a strangely formal process with my own son, entering my number into his phone like a new acquaintance rather than the man who had carried him on my shoulders through this very market. As we prepared to leave, Michael paused. "There's a school break coming up in 3 weeks. I could drive up again, maybe bring lunch to your place." The suggestion was casual but deliberate. "I'd like that very much," I said, careful to match his tone. We walked outside together, the afternoon sun breaking through Seattle's perpetual cloud cover. At the corner where we would part ways, Michael surprised me by extending his hand. I took it, and for a brief moment, we were connected again, not as we once were, but in a new configuration that acknowledged the men we had become. "Take care of yourself, Dad," he said. And I heard the words he didn't add, "because now I care what happens to you again." "I will," I promised, and watched him walk away, his figure receding, but no longer vanishing completely from my life. The following week brought my third chemotherapy session. The process was becoming familiar, the sterile smell of the treatment room, the cool rush of medications entering my bloodstream, the steady beeping of monitors. Ray was in his usual recliner, looking marginally better than during our previous session. He explained when I commented on his color, "My numbers are improving. How about yours?" "I'm holding steady. The tumor markers haven't decreased significantly, but they haven't increased either. The oncologist calls it stable disease." Ray nodded sagely. "Stable is good. Gives the chemo more time to work." He glanced at the empty chair beside me. "Any visitors today?" "Not today, but my daughter is coming this weekend, and my son might visit in a few weeks." His eyebrows rose. "Progress." "Small steps," I agreed. "Very small." "That's how healing works," Ray said, settling back into his recliner. "Cell by cell, day by day, relationship by relationship." I pondered his words as the medication slowly dripped into my system. In my legal career, I'd valued decisive action, dramatic courtroom victories, clear winners and losers. The gradual process of physical and emotional healing felt foreign, a different kind of strength than the forceful authority I'd wielded for decades. When I returned home exhausted from treatment, I found an unexpected package at my door. Inside was a soft, knitted cap in muted blue with a note in unfamiliar handwriting. "For cold days." From Ray's wife, Jean. The simple kindness from a stranger, the wife of a man I knew only through our shared medical circumstance, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. I wore the cap to my next appointment with Dr. Brenner, who nodded approvingly. "Looks good. How are things progressing with your children?" "Cautiously," I said. "Emma visited briefly. Michael and I had coffee. They're considering what reconciliation might look like." He made notes in my chart. "And how are you handling the emotional aspects of treatment? Many patients experience depression or anxiety." "I'm managing," I said, automatically, then reconsidered. "Actually, that's not entirely true. The nights are difficult, not because of physical discomfort, but because that's when doubts creep in." "Doubts about treatment?" "About whether I've left it too late, whether these attempts at reconnection are fair to my children, forcing them to deal with a dying father after years of absence." Dr. Brenner set down his pen. "First, you're not dying imminently. The treatment is working as expected." His expression softened slightly. "Second, you're not forcing anything. You've extended an invitation. They're free to accept or decline. That's respect, not manipulation." "How is it going with Daniel?" I asked, curious about his own reconciliation journey. A slight smile. "We're meeting weekly for lunch. It's still awkward sometimes, but less so each time. He's bringing his fiancée to dinner next Sunday." "That's wonderful," I said sincerely. "It's a work in progress," he corrected. "Just like your situation." He resumed his examination, checking my lymph nodes with practiced fingers. "The path to healing isn't linear, Thomas. There are setbacks alongside the progress. The key is persistence without expectation." Persistence without expectation became my mantra in the weeks that followed. Emma's visits grew slightly longer, a little less formal each time. She began bringing her laptop, working quietly in my living room while I rested after treatment, present without pressure. She never stayed overnight, but the gesture of remaining in my space, sharing air and silence, felt like a gift I'd never properly appreciated before. Michael's promised lunch visit materialized on a rainy Tuesday. He arrived carrying containers from a nearby deli and a stack of essays to grade. "Hope you don't mind if I work while we eat. Midterms." "Not at all," I replied, genuinely pleased just to have his presence. We ate in companionable silence, the sound of rain against windows and the occasional rustle of papers, the only interruption. It felt oddly comforting, being together without the pressure of constant conversation, each occupied with our own tasks, yet sharing the same space. I wondered if this was how family life should have been all along, natural, unforced. As he prepared to leave, he hesitated by the door. "Dad, there's a history department dinner next month. Faculty and families. Would you like to come? If you're feeling up to it?" The invitation stunned me. "I'd be honored," I managed. He nodded, eyes averted. "It's nothing fancy. Just colleagues and food in the school cafeteria." "It sounds perfect," I said sincerely. After he left, I sat for a long time processing what had just happened. My son had invited me into his world, the professional life I'd once dismissed as beneath his potential. It was a gesture of immense significance, offering me the chance to witness firsthand the career he had built without my blessing. The next day, I shared the development with Sophia during our regular support session. "He's introducing me to his colleagues," I said, still slightly amazed. "That is important," she confirmed. "He's integrating you into his present life, not just acknowledging the past. That's a significant step in reconciliation." "I don't want to overinterpret," I cautioned. "Understanding the meaning doesn't mean overreaching in response," she advised.
Continue as you have been, present, honest, without expectation. As my fourth chemotherapy session approached, my blood tests revealed concerning results. White cell counts too low to proceed safely with treatment. Dr. Brenner prescribed a week's delay and medication to boost my immune system. "This is normal," he assured me. "Many patients need adjustments to their protocol." But the setback affected me more deeply than I anticipated. After weeks of cautious optimism on multiple fronts, my health, my relationships with my children, my adaptation to a different way of living, the delay felt like a reminder of how tenuous everything remained. I found myself in an unexpected emotional trough, spending days in uncharacteristic idleness, staring out at Seattle's skyline without truly seeing it. When my phone rang with Emma's name on the display, I nearly let it go to voicemail, reluctant to burden her with my discouragement. "Dad?" Her voice, when I finally answered, held a note of concern. "Are you all right? You sound off." "Just tired," I said automatically. "Dad," she repeated, firmer now, "remember what you promised in your letter. Honesty, even when it's difficult." Her echo of my own words broke through the protective barrier I'd begun reconstructing. "They've delayed my treatment," I admitted. "My counts are too low. It's making me question everything." She was quiet for a moment. "I'm coming over," she said finally. "I'll bring dinner." "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to," she interrupted. "I want to." 2 hours later, she arrived with grocery bags and a determined expression. Without ceremony, she moved into my kitchen and began preparing a meal, declining my offers of help. "Sit," she instructed. "Talk to me about what's really bothering you." Watching my daughter navigate my barely used kitchen with unexpected competence, I found myself speaking more openly than I had in years. "I'm afraid I've started something I can't finish," I confessed. "Reconnecting with you and Michael, only to leave again. This time permanently." Her hands stilled briefly over the cutting board, then resumed their rhythm. "That's always the risk with relationships," she said quietly. "Every connection eventually ends, but that doesn't make them less worth having." "When did you get so wise?" I asked, genuinely curious. A small smile.
Therapy. Lots of it. After Mom left, after you and I stopped really talking, I needed to understand why our family fractured the way it did. And what did you learn? She considered this while arranging vegetables in a roasting pan. That everyone was doing their best with the tools they had at the time. Mom couldn't keep pouring herself into a marriage where she felt invisible. You couldn't see past the definition of success you'd internalized. Michael and I couldn't articulate what we really needed from you. And now, I asked. Now we have different tools. She slid the pan into the oven and turned to face me. Better communication, more self-awareness, the ability to set boundaries without building walls. The meal she prepared was simple but nourishing. Roasted vegetables, quinoa, grilled chicken. Food designed to strengthen a compromised immune system, I realized. She'd researched what I needed. As we ate, she asked tentative questions about my childhood, my early career, parts of my life story she'd never heard because I'd never thought to share them. I found myself recounting memories long buried. My working-class upbringing in Eastern Washington, my struggle through law school on scholarships and loans, the hunger to prove myself that had eventually consumed everything else. I never knew any of this, Emma said, when I described living on ramen noodles during my first year at law school. You always seemed like you were born in a three-piece suit. That was the image I cultivated. I thought showing where I came from would make me seem weak or unpolished. It would have made you human, she said gently. To us, you were this perfect, untouchable figure who was perpetually disappointed that we couldn't measure up. The assessment struck me with painful accuracy. I never meant to make you feel that way. I know that now, but it took years to understand. After dinner, she insisted on staying, setting up her laptop at my dining table to work while I rested on the sofa. The simple act of having her nearby as evening settled over the city brought a comfort I hadn't experienced since before my divorce. As she prepared to leave around midnight, she hesitated at the door. I could come back tomorrow, bring lunch, work from here for the afternoon.
Dad, he said, echoing Emma's earlier exasperation, I'm offering because I want to be there, not out of obligation. As I drove home that night, I reflected on how profoundly my understanding of connection had changed. For decades, I'd viewed relationships primarily as transactions, giving to get, measuring value against cost. Now I was learning to recognize the gift in simple presence, in choosing to occupy the same space during difficult moments. True to his word, Michael met me at the cancer center for my 5th chemotherapy session. He set up camp in the chair beside mine, a stack of student essays and his laptop, creating a portable office. His presence transformed the sterile medical experience, not through dramatic gestures or emotional declarations, but simply by being there, occasionally looking up to offer water or adjust my blanket when the room grew cold. Ray nodded approvingly from his recliner across the room, giving me a subtle thumbs up when Michael stepped away briefly. Family? He mouthed. My son, I confirmed, the two simple words carrying weight I couldn't have imagined months earlier. During a particularly rough moment, when nausea overtook me, Michael set aside his grating and simply placed his hand on my arm, a gesture so natural yet so unprecedented in our relationship that it nearly undid me. It's okay, he said quietly. Just breathe through it. I focused on his touch, steady and warm against my skin, and realized he was giving me something I'd never given him during his childhood struggles. Physical comfort without words or solutions, just human connection during pain. Afterward, Michael insisted on driving me home despite my protests that I could manage. Humor me, he said firmly. I'd rather know you got home safely. At my condo, he helped me settle on the sofa, bringing water and medications, before reluctantly preparing to leave for an afternoon faculty meeting. Emma said she'll stop by after work,
he assured me. Call if you need anything before then. As he gathered his things, I found myself saying, I never thanked you properly for what you did today. He looked puzzled. I didn't do anything special. You were there, I said simply. That's everything. A flicker of emotion crossed his face before he nodded once. I'll check in tomorrow. Later that evening, Emma arrived as promised with dinner and her laptop. This had become our routine 3 nights a week. She would work nearby while I rested, occasionally discussing her cases or sharing memories that had previously gone unspoken. Tonight, however, she seemed preoccupied, repeatedly checking her phone with unusual frequency. Is everything all right? I finally asked. She hesitated, then set down her work. I've been offered a position with an environmental law center in Boston. It's a significant opportunity, leading their climate litigation division. That's wonderful, I said sincerely, though a selfish part of me immediately calculated what this would mean for our newfound connection. When would you start? That's the thing, she said, meeting my eyes directly. I've told them I can't relocate until summer at the earliest. Understanding dawned slowly. Because of me, I said quietly. Because of us, she corrected. This reconnection matters to me, Dad. I'm not walking away from it now. Emma, I can't let you put your career on hold. I'm not putting anything on hold, she interrupted firmly. I'm prioritizing what matters most right now. The position will still be there in 6 months. They've agreed to a delayed start date. I studied my daughter, this composed, determined woman who had learned to establish boundaries while still offering connection. When did you get so wise about balancing career and family? I asked. Her smile held a touch of irony. I learned from watching what didn't work. The following week brought a scheduled scan to evaluate my response to treatment. Dr. Brenner had prepared me for all possibilities: progression, tumor growth despite treatment, or stable disease, no significant change, or partial response, tumor shrinkage. Emma and Michael both offered to accompany me to receive the results, but I declined, not wanting to burden them with what might be disappointing news. Instead, I sat alone in Dr. Brenner's office, studying the diplomas on his wall while waiting for his arrival. When he entered, his expression gave nothing away: the practiced neutrality of an experienced physician who had delivered both miracles and devastation throughout his career. Thomas, he greeted me, taking his seat and opening my file. How are you feeling? Anxious, I admitted. Let's not prolong the suspense. He nodded, appreciating directness. The scan shows a 30% reduction in tumor size, he said, turning his monitor so I could see the comparative images. That's a significant partial response. Relief washed through me so powerfully I had to grip the arms of my chair. That's good? It's very good, he confirmed. Better than we typically see at this stage for your type of cancer. The treatment is working as we'd hoped. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The reality of this reprieve, however temporary, overwhelming me. Dr. Brenner waited patiently, understanding the emotional impact of his words. What happens next? I finally asked. We continue the current protocol for 3 more cycles, then reassess. If the response continues, we'll complete the full course of chemotherapy followed by maintenance treatment. I nodded, processing the information clinically, before allowing myself to absorb its emotional significance. This means I have more time. Yes, he said simply. How will you use it? The question wasn't medical, but deeply human. The same one he'd asked indirectly months ago when he'd written that note to himself, "Call my son." Continuing what I've started, I said, with my children, with myself. Good, he approved. How are things progressing on that front? Better than I could have imagined, I admitted. Not perfect, not complete, but real. He smiled slightly. Much like your treatment response. As I prepared to leave, I remembered something. How's Daniel and the fiancé dinner? Dr. Brenner's expression softened. It went well. They're expecting a child, my first grandchild. They told us that night. Congratulations, I said sincerely. Thank you. He hesitated, then added, Daniel asked me to be involved in the pregnancy. Doctor's appointments, preparation for the baby, things I would have considered insignificant before. But not now, I observed. Not now, he agreed. Funny how perspective shifts, isn't it? Outside the hospital, I sat in my car, overwhelmed by the news and uncertain whom to call first. In the end, I texted both my children the same simple message. Good news from the scan. 30% reduction. Treatment working. Their responses came almost simultaneously. Emma's call and Michael's text asking if he could stop by that evening. For the first time in decades, I had people who genuinely wanted to share both my struggles and my victories. That night, we gathered in my living room. Emma perched on the sofa beside me, Michael in the armchair nearby, as I explained Dr. Brenner's findings in detail. So this buys time, Michael said, processing the information with his teacher's analytical mind. Yes, though nothing is certain with cancer. Emma reached for my hand, a gesture that would have been unthinkable months earlier. We'll take whatever time we get, she said quietly. Michael nodded in agreement. One day at a time. Looking at them, my children, now adults with their own fully formed lives, I felt something I'd rarely experienced. Complete presence in the moment, without anxiety about the future or regret about the past. Whatever came next, this moment of connection was real and precious. The following weeks established a new rhythm to our reconnection. Emma continued her 3-night routine, occasionally sleeping in my guest room when work ran late. Michael joined us for dinner once weekly, sometimes bringing student work to share or historical documentaries he thought might interest me. Gradually, our conversations expanded beyond safe topics to include more challenging terrain, their childhood memories, the impact of my absence, their feelings about their mother's departure. These discussions weren't easy, often leaving all of us emotionally drained, but they were necessary for authentic healing. During one such evening, Michael asked a question that caught me off guard. Do you ever think about trying to reconnect with Mom? I set down my fork, considering his question carefully. I've thought about it, but that would be for her to decide. I was as absent from her life as from yours, just in different ways. Emma studied me thoughtfully. You really changed, Dad. Even how you talk about relationships is different. Cancer is an effective teacher, though an unnecessarily harsh one. Maybe we could mention to her that you're ill, Michael suggested tentatively. Just as information, not pressure. The offer touched me deeply, my children considering facilitating reconciliation with their mother, whom they'd seen hurt by my neglect.
That should be your decision, I said. Your relationship with her is separate from mine. They exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret before Emma changed the subject. Later, as they prepared to leave, Michael paused at the door. The oral history project I mentioned at the faculty dinner, we're looking for volunteer interviewers, people to record the stories of neighborhood elders. He hesitated. Your legal interview skills might transfer well if you're interested. The invitation to participate in his professional world, to contribute meaningfully, caught me by surprise. I'd like that, I said, if you think I'd be helpful. I do, he said simply. Training session Saturday morning, if you're feeling up to it. That Saturday found me in Michael's classroom, alongside a diverse group of volunteers, college students, retirees, and community members, learning oral history interview techniques. Michael led the session with confident expertise, occasionally catching my eye to ensure I was following along. The key, he emphasized to the group, is to listen more than you speak. These interviews aren't about extracting specific information. They're about creating space for people to share their stories in their own words. I smiled at the irony. This principle I was just beginning to learn in my personal relationships was precisely what Michael was teaching professionally. Perhaps if I had understood this concept decades earlier with my own family, we might have avoided years of estrangement. After the session, Michael introduced me to several elderly participants from the neighborhood, former factory workers, immigrants who had arrived during various waves of migration, small business owners who had watched the area transform over decades. Their stories fascinated me. Ordinary lives containing extraordinary resilience and wisdom. An elderly Italian man named Giuseppe particularly captured my attention with his account of arriving in Seattle as a teenager in the 1950s, speaking no English but carrying his family's culinary traditions. Nobody wanted Italian food then, he told me with a chuckle. Now they paid $30 for my mama's pasta recipe at fancy restaurants. As I listened, I realized I was engaging with these strangers more authentically than I had with my own family throughout my career, giving them my complete attention, asking questions out of genuine curiosity rather than strategic advantage. Michael observed my interactions with approval. "You're natural," he commented as we walked to our cars afterward. "The participants responded well to you." "It feels meaningful," I admitted. "Different from deposing witnesses to win cases." "That's exactly why I wanted you involved," he said. "I thought you might appreciate the difference." The following week brought my 6th chemotherapy session, the halfway point in my treatment protocol. By now, the routine was familiar, though no less challenging physically. Ray, my treatment companion since the beginning, was notably absent from his usual recliner. "Mr. Peterson completed his course last week," the nurse informed me when I inquired. "His final scans were excellent, complete response." The news about Ray simultaneously encouraged and disoriented me. His steady presence had become part of my treatment landscape, his wisdom a quiet support through difficult days. As if sensing my thoughts, the nurse added, "He left something for you," handing me an envelope with my name written in shaky handwriting. Inside was a simple note. "The journey continues after treatment ends. So does the healing. Coffee next month?" Ray included his phone number and a gift card to a cafe near the hospital. I smiled at this unexpected continuation of connection beyond the confines of our shared medical experience. Perhaps that was the lesson in all of this, that meaningful bonds could form in unlikely circumstances, transcending their original context. Emma joined me for this treatment session, working quietly on her laptop while occasionally checking if I needed anything. Her presence had become so natural that I sometimes found myself marveling at the transformation in our relationship. The formal distance that had characterized our interactions for years had given way to comfortable companionship. "I spoke with Mom last night," she said casually, during a break in her work. I looked up, surprised. "Oh?" "She asked about you," Emma continued, watching me carefully. "Michael might have mentioned your situation during their last call."
I absorbed this information silently. Catherine, my ex-wife, the woman whose love I'd taken for granted until she finally left, was asking about me after years of necessary distance. "What did you tell her?" I asked, finally. "The truth," Emma replied. "About your diagnosis, your treatment, and about our reconciliation." She hesitated. She seemed thoughtful. I nodded, unsure how to respond. Catherine had every reason to maintain her distance, having already given me far more chances than I'd deserved during our marriage. "She mentioned she might be in Seattle next month," Emma added, "for a conference." The implication hung between us, not a promise of reunion, but a door left slightly ajar. "That's good to know," I said carefully. Emma smiled slightly. "Just thought you should be aware." As we drove home after treatment, exhaustion settled over me like a heavy blanket. Emma noticed my discomfort and reached over to squeeze my hand briefly. "You know," she said thoughtfully,
When Michael and I first received your letters, we were skeptical. We thought this was about your fear of dying alone, that you were reaching out for caretakers, not for genuine connection. I winced at the accuracy of their initial assessment. A reasonable assumption, given our history. But that's not what happened, she continued. You didn't ask for help. You offered understanding. You acknowledged harm without expecting instant forgiveness. You gave us space to decide what reconciliation might look like. She glanced at me. That wasn't what we expected. It wasn't what I expected either, I admitted. I thought I was writing those letters to close a circle before the end. Instead, they opened something entirely new. She nodded. That's what Mom said when Michael told her about your illness. She said, sometimes it takes losing everything to discover what was always there. Catherine's insight struck me with unexpected force. This wisdom from the woman who had known me at my most ambitious and my most neglectful. Even now, she understood something fundamental about transformation that I was only beginning to grasp. As we arrived at my condo, Emma helped me inside, setting up medications and water within easy reach. I'll stay tonight, she said, not a question, but a statement of intent, just to make sure you're comfortable. After the war, nobody wanted to talk about what happened, she told me, her voice steady despite the painful memories. We were told to forget, to assimilate, to prove we were real Americans. But forgetting isn't healing. It just buries the wound. Her words resonated deeply, echoing my own experience of burying emotional truths beneath professional accomplishments. How did you move forward? I asked. She smiled gently. One story at a time. When I finally started speaking about our experiences, first to my children, then to community groups, eventually to schools, something shifted. The pain didn't disappear, but it transformed into something purposeful. After the interview, Michael found me sitting alone, processing Esther's wisdom. She's remarkable, isn't she? He said, joining me. She made me think about how I've handled my own history, I admitted. Always forward momentum, never looking back, certainly never sharing vulnerabilities. That's changing, he observed. You're becoming a storyteller too. His comment surprised me. Am I? With Emma and me, he clarified. You're finally sharing your story. Not just the achievements, but the struggles, the regrets, the human parts. He glanced at me. It matters. This new pattern of authentic communication extended beyond my children to unexpected corners of my life. When Dr. Brenner scheduled my mid-treatment comprehensive evaluation, I found myself discussing not just physical symptoms, but emotional responses with unprecedented candor. "The fatigue is different than I expected," I told him during our appointment. "It's not just physical tiredness, it's a deeper depletion that affects my ability to maintain emotional equilibrium." He nodded. "That's an astute observation. We call it emotional lability, increased sensitivity that can manifest as mood swings, unexpected tears, heightened responses to both positive and negative stimuli." "I've never been particularly emotionally expressive," I admitted. "Now I find myself moved by small kindnesses, disturbed by minor setbacks." "Many patients describe this as a kind of emotional transparency," he said. "The usual filters and defenses we maintain are thinned by treatment." "Is that beneficial?" I wondered. He considered this thoughtfully. "Medically speaking, emotional suppression can increase stress hormones that potentially impact immune function, but beyond that, many patients report that this heightened emotional awareness leads to meaningful reprioritization." I thought of my growing connections with Emma and Michael, my involvement in the oral history project, the deeper relationships developing with people like Ray. "I can see that," I acknowledged, "though it's uncomfortable sometimes." "Growth usually is," he said simply. My scans that day showed continued response to treatment, the tumor shrinking further, no new metastases. While not a complete remission, it represented the best-case scenario for someone with my diagnosis at this stage. "We'll complete the planned chemotherapy course, then transition to a maintenance protocol. With these results, we're talking about managing this as a chronic condition rather than an immediate crisis." The implications of his words settled over me gradually, not a cure, but time. Time measured in months, certainly, possibly years rather than weeks. Time to continue what had begun with those desperate letters from a hospital bed. When I shared the news with Emma and Michael over dinner that night, their reactions reflected our evolving relationship, neither dismissing my career shift as crisis-induced, nor pressuring me toward decisions that prioritized their convenience. "The asylum work sounds perfect," Emma said thoughtfully. "It draws on your litigation strengths while connecting to values you've reconnected with." Michael nodded. "Some of my students' families have been through the asylum process. Having competent representation makes a profound difference." "It would be part-time initially, leaving space for continued involvement with the oral history project and regular family time." "Balance," Emma observed with a smile.
"Who are you and what have you done with our father?" We laughed together, the gentle teasing evidence of newfound comfort in our relationship. His dinner concluded, Michael cleared his throat in a way that suggested he had something significant to share. "There's something I've been meaning to tell you," he began. "Jason, my former student who now teaches with me, and I are collaborating on a book based on the oral history project. The university press is interested." "That's wonderful," I said sincerely. "We'd like to include your contributions," he continued. "Your perspective as both an interviewer and someone with legal expertise in immigration cases would add significant depth." The invitation to participate meaningfully in my son's professional accomplishment touched me deeply. "I'd be honored," I said. Emma smiled at this exchange, then added her own news. "Since we're sharing, I should mention that I've negotiated a remote work arrangement with the Boston position. I'll travel there monthly for in-person meetings, but maintain my home base in Seattle." Understanding dawned slowly. "Because of my health situation?" "Partially," she acknowledged, "but also because I've rediscovered what family connection offers. I'm not willing to sacrifice that again, regardless of your prognosis." Her words reflected a profound shift in our family dynamic, from my children accommodating my schedule and priorities to all of us consciously arranging our lives to preserve newly valuable connections. As spring bloomed into summer, these intentional choices manifested in a life remarkably different from the one I'd led before diagnosis.
My professional transition to asylum cases brought challenges and rewards I hadn't experienced in decades. Clients whose gratitude wasn't measured in billable hours, colleagues motivated by purpose rather than profit, victories that changed individual lives in tangible ways. The Oral History Project expanded beyond initial expectations, developing into a comprehensive community archive that would preserve neighborhood memories for generations. Michael's classroom became a familiar space where I occasionally shared legal perspectives with students whose curiosity and idealism reminded me of ambitions long buried under career advancement. Most significantly, family gatherings evolved from tentative reconnections to established routines. Sunday brunches with Amma became weekly constants, regardless of our other commitments. Monthly dinners with Michael included tours of his latest classroom projects and animated discussions about historical parallels to current events. Even Catherine joined us occasionally during her Seattle visits. Our shared history transformed from source of pain to foundation for a different kind of connection. On a particularly beautiful July evening, we gathered at Emma's apartment for dinner on her rooftop terrace. As the sunset painted Seattle's skyline in gold and pink, I found myself overwhelmed by awareness of how profoundly my life had transformed since that sterile doctor's office where I'd first admitted my isolation. "What are you thinking about?" Emma asked, noticing my momentary abstraction. "About honest answers," I replied, "and how one truth-telling moment can alter everything that follows." Michael looked up from the grill where he was preparing salmon. "You mean with Dr. Brenner that first day?" I nodded. When he asked if I had family support, I could have given my usual response, the fiction about busy children just a phone call away. Instead, I told the truth about my isolation. "And he cried," Emma recalled, from my earlier telling of the story. "Yes," I confirmed, "because my truth revealed his own, about his estrangement from Daniel. And now they're celebrating twin grandchildren," Michael added, having heard updates through my treatment reports. "While we're celebrating this," I gestured to encompass our gathering. The shared meal, the comfortable conversation, the easy presence that had once seemed impossibly remote, all because of a moment of honesty in a doctor's office. Emma considered this thoughtfully. "It wasn't just the honesty, though. It was what followed. Your willingness to reach out without expectations, our decision to respond, all of us choosing connection over past hurts."
One truth followed by many choices, Michael summarized, always the teacher distilling complex ideas to their essence. As the city lights began twinkling below us and the first stars appeared above, I recognized that this gathering of imperfect people who had hurt each other yet chosen reconciliation represented the most meaningful achievement of my life. Not courtroom victories or professional accolades, but the patient, deliberate rebuilding of connections I had once carelessly discarded. The cancer that had threatened to end my life had instead transformed it, not through dramatic epiphanies, but through the accumulation of small, intentional choices made in the shadow of mortality. The diagnosis hadn't given me guarantees about future years, but it had given me profound clarity about how to live whatever time remained, with purpose, with presence, with authentic connection. As we raised our glasses in a spontaneous toast to the sunset, I silently thanked Dr. Brenner for asking the question that had started everything, and myself for finally answering it honestly, even as the answer made him cry. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.